Welcome. So AWS has a lot of users who share a lot of enthusiasm and build these really strong AWS communities around the world. They share a lot of their expert knowledge through blog posts, social media, workshops, meetups, and more. And we're actually pretty excited to have one of our AWS community heroes here today.
Thank you.
Drew. So please, can you introduce yourself?
Yeah, sure. I'm Drew Firment. I'm currently a managing partner at A Cloud Guru, so we're teaching the world to cloud. I was previously with Capital One for quite some time and helped to lead their early adoption for a little bit, and I was director of operations, and then I switched over to dean of cloud computing. So yeah, it's a great 20 years at Capital One actually. Yeah, how about that?
What is a dean of cloud computing?
So when I was at Capital One, we ended up driving, we were all in on AWS, right? So it was a really forward, progressive company. It's really more of a tech company, to be honest with you, than a bank. So I helped with the initial 3 applications, getting them into production, helping to figure out what the production readiness checklist is. And then we tried to scale that, really going from 3 to 30 to 300 to 3,000 applications and moving them in the cloud.
Wow.
So I was, as director of operations, I had the privilege of having third-level support. So I really felt the pain when individuals didn't understand the cloud. So I really realized early on that the issue is not about technology, right? It's really a people issue. We have 5,000, 10,000 engineers. And when you have a lot of them that are spelling AWS WTF, right, that ends up being a problem. So I ended up establishing a cloud college at Capital One. At one point, we had about 4,000 engineers going through the cloud college and trying to just establish basic cloud fluency to create this idea of critical mass. So I ended up becoming dean of cloud computing. I had nice leather patches on my jacket, so it was really.
Did you get the smoking pipe also?
I had the smoking pipe, yes, very much so. So what I did though is I measured the real where and the why for Capital One was how much we can move into the cloud in a well-managed, well-architected, compliant manner, and also cost-efficient. So I established these KPIs, actually has a patent on it now, the measurement of our cloud transformation. And I looked to correlate it to training. And after doing a lot of training, I really wasn't moving things as fast as I wanted to. Because the real where and the why was moving stuff to the cloud, right? But training is almost a vanity metric in terms of saying, okay, I need to get people trained, but that's going to really make the difference in how you get stuff there, right? So I really struggled, to be honest with you. We had a lot of training that we were doing. We're spending a lot of money on training, but my KPIs were still sitting in the bottom left. So I ended up building a program, a transformation program centered around certifications, and ended up going from about 20 people certified to now there's about, I heard the number, it's 2% of all certified developers in the US now work at Capital One. Wow. And we were able to, over time, get this critical mass where you create this sustainable transition to this new operating model, right? And then you have this hockey stick of inflection with your KPIs. And as you know, with Capital One here with their booth and a lot of their talks, they're definitely in a sustainable mode to their new operating model, right? It's an amazing, amazing organization.
Yeah, that's cool. And I guess it must be really difficult with the different kinds of projects. You can't just say, this is my cloud architecture or strategy with 3,000 apps and how many teams you have.
There is a lot of autonomy that the teams have within Capital One, and most organizations, have their different, even like, AWS, they have your different product organizations. And the real value of the certification was to establish this common vernacular, right? This basic cloud fluency where everybody has a common knowledge base to work from, and then you can really enable them.
Let me ask you, because this is a very common thing among developers, this fear of being in such big, controlled environment, and I guess Capital One is like, what would you say for engineers that are starting now and looking at the whole cloud business and afraid with all the misconceptions and things doubts that are normal in this stage, and they really want to get in this mature cloud level? What would you suggest for those guys?
Look, I mean, once you have cloud, you never go back, right? I mean, it's just a different way of operating. And you know, Andy Jassy and Werner talk a lot about let AWS do the undifferentiated heavy lifting, right? And the real cool thing about the cloud, especially when you get into serverless architecture, is you can really focus on what matters to your customers from the product and focus on core business functions. And you know, there's a lot of stuff that you don't want to be doing, like, you know, you don't want to be pulling cables, you don't want to be patching databases, right? And when you get to serverless, right, you just eliminate a lot of the surface area. And you really get to focus on your business value, and as a developer, you get to be able to see your code really matter. So I refer to that as frictionless innovation, right? And that's what AWS really enables. So, and I don't think that's possible with a lot of on-prem solutions.
But I mean, for the developer who is in a less mature company and they have this struggle trying to convince their hierarchy to adopt the cloud or to get started with this, what would you say to the new guys?
Yeah, that's a difficult thing, right? Because I mean, right now, there's a lot of issues in leadership in some of these large organizations, and you know, you know, at this point, if they're not already working in the cloud, I mean, they better be, right? Because they're going to be disrupted. And as an engineer, the best thing to do is, you know, one, you get certified because it's a great way to start, and it's high-paying certification, right? You get this common knowledge, you have something to point to, but you get exposed to all the different services. But what you can do is you could also experiment a little bit and start pointing to really small things that you can start to not try to boil the ocean and have this big project, but start with something simple and demonstrable, a little fun project, and start to create a little bit of enthusiasm. And then eventually you can find hopefully the right sponsorship. But it's really up to these individuals to not be a victim and to step into this space and take ownership for their learning, because they need to move to this operating model. Right? It's really, really
I
important.
see that getting their hands on doing this proof of concepts, even in smaller projects, is really helpful.
Yeah, very much. And I'm an Alexa champion as well for Alexa development champion, and I use Alexa to help do a little like mini hackathons around it, because it's a really fun way to have something fun and demonstrable. But you break through a lot of the barriers in education, right? You have to get access to the AWS console, you build a Lambda function, you know, you start connecting different AWS services, and you start getting, then you could point to something, and you can start sharing it.
So one thing you were talking about, so once you get that traction going within the company, and now people are starting to use more cloud, you mentioned something about critical mass.
Yes.
And I think that's really, can you kind of elaborate on that?
Yeah, it's really fundamental to doing a massive transformation, right? So, when I was measuring these architectural KPIs and the cost and trying to get stuff moved to the cloud, you have to be able to get this inertia to cross this chasm or get to this inflection point, right? And AWS certification ended up being my measurement of trying to determine how do I get to this critical mass of individuals that can influence the majority. And 10% is this magic number. There was a study done in 2011 where they modeled societal behavior. And they showed that when you have 10% of a society that believes in a certain idea, that if it's anything below that 10%, nothing changes. But once you get to that 10%, you hit this inflection point, and then the majority starts to adopt the belief of these committed agents. And that's this pivot point. So when I started working on this and using the cloud as a culture, AWS as a language, well, let's identify those individuals as committed agents. Right? And when you get AWS certified, you're an expert, because now you know how much you don't know, right? But you have the capacity to learn it. So measuring getting 10% of that certification, then you start creating that groundswell into that new model. And I measured and I was able to show where we had those 10% of these individuals, you just started to move your architectural KPIs up and up and over, right? And migrate a lot faster.
Could you tell us a bit about your role at Cloud Guru and what you guys are doing there to help
sure.
this way?
With the shirt.
I love me some Cloud Guru. So when I was at Capital One, I actually got exposed to a Cloud Guru, and the way I got exposed to them was all the engineers said, hey, why aren't you using a Cloud Guru? So it's a group of engineers. They actually developed the first serverless startup. It's a learning management system on serverless. And they have great content because it's engineers that talk to engineers about engineering. So they really kind of connect with individuals. And so I started using them. I actually had them come out to Capital One. They did a keynote about serverless. And as I was looking to leave Capital One, I had a midlife crisis. I figured I'd have a healthy midlife crisis and go to a startup. And Ryan Kroonenberg and Sam Kroonenberg, who are the founders, asked me to join. I've never looked back, and it's been awesome.
Cool.
Very, very passionate about what I do and what they do. And it gives me an opportunity to kind of scratch some itches around diversity and inclusion in the cloud, which is really, really important to me.
Great. Well, we're really happy to see you sharing your knowledge across so many more companies now, and we're very thankful having you as a community hero.
Thank you. I appreciate
thank you very
that.
much.
Yeah, it was nice talking with you.
Likewise.
Pleasure.
Thank you, Drew.
All right, thank you very much.
And next up, we have Markus, who's in from Germany. So,
Hey.
Hey guys.
Markus, tell us a little bit about yourself.
Yeah, my name is Markus Ostertag. I'm the co-founder and organizer of the user group in Munich, the AWS user group in Munich, of course. And I think we're there for 3.5 years now. It's a monthly gathering with more than 100 to 150 people every month. Actually meeting there, talking to each other, and networking, stuff like that.
What are some of the topics you guys have during your events?
Actually, we try to cover nearly everything. So if there is a new service, if there are new announcements, stuff like that, then we're trying to cover that, trying to tell the people about how they can use the new service or the new features, or what might AWS have in mind for those new features, and how we can use them, or what are the use cases. And then very often people from the user group itself will go on stage and talk about, okay, this is what I did with this service, this is how I worked around issues or something like that.
Cool. And any particular way you select topics and decide what you're going to talk about, or is this?
That's difficult,
Yeah.
but most of the time we're really trying to figure out the real world use cases about people telling us what they build with AWS on AWS and how they solve their problems with things on AWS. Those are kind of the war room stories, if you want to say so.
And at each different place is a different challenges for user groups. At your user group, was there anything in the beginning that you found challenging or hard up to this point?
Running a user group is challenging, you're right.
Yeah.
I think the most important part for us was we started with just a very easy gathering in a beer garden. Typical Munich thing, obviously, having some beers, talking in a beer garden, and just trying to figure out who are the people and what are they interested in. And those were the first 2-3 times we actually met, and then we tried to find out, okay, should we really do the typical way of a conference style where somebody goes on stage, talks about things, and as people were pretty happy that we should do or go that way, then we asked around.
And you grew a lot. Like, was it mouth to mouth, or did you do any kind of marketing?
Happy enough, I didn't need to do any kind of marketing, so it was really just mouth to mouth. So people were obviously pretty happy about what we were doing at the user group and at the meetings, and then they talked with their peers and talked with people and brought people into the next user group, and now we are at a stage where people are we're seeing constantly new faces every month, but we also have kind of a core group that are on nearly every user group or every meetup we have.
I see.
So very recently, I think back in September, you guys had an AWS Community Tech Days.
Yeah.
Can you talk a little bit about what that event was and share some stories from it?
Yeah, actually we had this, as you said, Community Tech Days Cologne, I think it was the official naming. We had that one in Cologne, so it was an event where all user group leads from all over Germany are working together on a 2-day event, bringing the content we have on the meetups, like from the community to the community, and our people on stage were just community people, so no AWS involved. AWS gave us kind of the, or gave us a lot of support and help for location and finding sponsors and stuff like that. But the whole content was just coming from the community. As I said, it was a 2-day event. So we had a very nice gathering and networking in the evening where we had a whole bar. And I think we were something like 300 people are just talking to each other, networking. And that was a really, really awesome experience to be there and just feeling how the atmosphere was, and everybody was talking about how they solved their problems with AWS. That was really, really great.
I'd like to join that.
You should do it the next time we do it.
Sure, let's
But
do it.
Absolutely,
Let's do it.
absolutely.
What can you talk a little bit about kind of how you became an AWS community hero? Like, I mean, it's a lot of people wonder, how do I do it? So what tips and guidance could you give?
I'm unsure how I got to community hero, to be honest. I just did what I liked. I founded the user group. I started with talking to people, talking about what I'm doing in my daily business, what I'm doing in my daily work with AWS, and sharing that knowledge. So just helping people to migrate over to the cloud, which still seems a big problem for some people, but also how to work around issues if you are running into new things, helping people out, trying to connect people in not only inside of the community, but also connecting the community to the AWS people, that AWS is able to help out things, stuff like that. And then, the user group grew, and then I tried to work even more on being on stage, talking at events like reInvent, the conference, stuff like that. And so just sharing the knowledge I have from my daily business.
Cool. Awesome. I guess this is the idea for every user group. And did you get support from partners and other companies in the area for the user group?
Yeah.
How that?
Absolutely.
Any experience on that?
In the end, we're moving, or we're trying to change for every month the location. So we're moving around to different offices in Munich. And
that's good. You have lots of...
Yeah, we have a lot of companies there which are able to host us, which are able to sponsor us. And so as the user group grew, people were just like, hey, we really want to do the sponsoring. Obviously, there are trying to find new developers or operations people or stuff like that. So they're very interested to get them at their location, which makes total sense and which is totally okay. And they're
because
sponsoring
this is hard to help user groups showing themselves to companies and partners to support them and creating this relationship.
Yeah.
It's not always easy. So this is one thing to help them hire and helping them to find people find jobs and jobs find people.
Exactly.
So you talk about, there's still a lot of people who are new to AWS, and you talk and you share a lot of knowledge and expertise.
Yeah.
What's the one tip that you can leave with them?
Just do it. It's literally like that. I think most people, especially when we're talking about enterprises and bigger companies, are stumbling upon the problem that they're not really committed to the cloud. So they're always like, yeah, we have this in our hosting facility, and now we moved it over to EC2, and that's it. And then it's too expensive, it doesn't work as it should be, stuff like that. But that's not really doing things in the cloud, being cloud native, all those kind of buzzwords around it. It's really about the commitment that you're now moving into the cloud, that you're using not your self-hosted, self-managed databases, but you are using the databases provided by AWS. For queuing systems, you don't use RabbitMQ hosted on EC2, you use SQS or SNS and stuff like that. So use the different services, because that's the main benefit you get out of the cloud, that you don't need to maintain your stuff like it was in the hosting facility. And that obviously needs the 100% commitment that you're now moving to the cloud, and there's no way back after that.
Excellent. Markus, thank you very much for taking the time.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you.